Dedicated researcher makes a startling discovery. A plant called tongsin contains a miraculous protease capable of repairing genetic chains. In a rush, she extracts the enzyme and begins analyzing it with advanced equipment. However, the system detects other elements in the protease, ones that might cause harmful side effects to the human body. Despite knowing the risks, she injects the enzyme into a developing embryo. Her excitement stems from a grim reality. Pollution from toxic gases has rendered humans infertile in the future world. In just a few decades, 99% of humanity has perished in pain and isolation. This is ERE, Spain's latest 2040 disaster blockbuster. The story begins with a devastating war. It all starts in the not-so-distant year of 2025, when World War III breaks out on Earth. Led by superpowers like the United States and Russia, the war escalates until a losing nation resorts to nuclear weapons. As mushroom clouds rise across the planet, Earth plunges into a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and human civilization crumbles. While ordinary people scream in terror, the elite secretly escape Earth on spaceships. For the survivors left behind, life enters what is now known as the Age of Radiation. But something even more horrifying emerges. Humans realize that breathing air contaminated by nuclear radiation has caused widespread infertility. With dwindling resources and no way to reproduce, humanity faces a countdown to extinction. Tanya is one of the few remaining survivors in this bleak world. Before the catastrophe, Tanya was fortunate enough to find refuge in a bunker equipped with an advanced artificial intelligence system. With the help of the AI VIDA, she manages to establish a small ecological cycle to barely survive. Over the next decade, Earth begins to show signs of recovery, though the air remains toxic, requiring respirators for anyone venturing outside. All these years, Tanya has worked tirelessly to find a cure for human infertility, desperate to save humanity's future. But despite her relentless efforts, she has found nothing. Until now. The bunker's resources were rapidly depleting, and without its protection, Tanya wouldn't even have the means to purify the toxic air. That morning, as Tanya woke up like any other day, she was greeted by devastating news from VIDA. The last surviving embryo sample she had nurtured for 10 weeks had just lost all vital signs. Staring at the failed embryo, despair washed over her. 6 months of effort had been in vain. The cause of death? DNA chains had fractured under radiation exposure, rendering the embryo unable to grow. VIDA suggested terminating her experiments and using the remaining resources to sustain Tanya's survival. But Tanya refused to give up. She returned to the lab, determined to find a way to repair the DNA. Dozens of experiments with various plants yielded no results. Just as she was about to give up, a plant called tongkao showed unexpected activity. A protease extracted from the plant appeared capable of repairing damaged DNA. However, the protease contained other elements that would need to be removed. Seeing hope, Tanya hurriedly extracted the enzyme and injected it into a new embryo. As she anxiously awaited results, VIDA issued a sudden warning. The bunker's ventilation system had failed. If not repaired within 10 minutes, the oxygen supply would run out. Tanya quickly donned her protective gear and climbed out of the bunker to the ventilation shaft. The issue turned out to be an old fan that had stopped working. With a few prods from a stick, the fan restarted, and the ventilation system came back online. Just as Tanya prepared to return, VIDA issued another warning. Startled, she turned to find a man standing nearby. In a world like this, humans were often more dangerous than the environment. Panicked, Tanya tried to flee, but the man caught up to her within moments. In the struggle, Tanya managed to trip the man. Before he could react, she grabbed a metal rod and knocked him unconscious. Standing over his unconscious body, Tanya hesitated. He was the first survivor she had encountered in over a decade. If she left him outside, the toxic air would kill him in 10 minutes. But if she brought him into the bunker, the already dwindling resources wouldn't be enough for both of them. After much deliberation, Tanya's compassion won out. She dragged the man back to the bunker and locked him in a separate room. Searching through his backpack, she found an ID card. VIDA scanned it and identified the man as Azarias, a former athlete. Unfortunately, he had lost the ability to reproduce. VIDA coldly suggested throwing Azarias back outside, calling him a useless drain on resources. But just as Tanya prepared to send him away, she noticed something odd. His ID had been scanned 2 days ago at an abandoned oxygen station 20 kilometers away. This meant Azarias had traveled a great distance. Curious, Tanya confronted Azarias, tossing one of his medals from the bag into the room. Seeing the medal, Azarias' expression softened with a mix of nostalgia and regret. Through conversation, Tanya learned that Azarias had been wandering the wasteland for years, searching for other survivors to band together. For over a decade, he had found no one and had begun to believe humanity was extinct until he stumbled upon Tanya. Though he didn't seem dangerous, Tanya still took precautions. She fitted him with an electronic shackle that would deliver an electric shock if he tried to harm her. Azarias agreed to wear it to earn her trust. Tanya released him from the room and even gave him some food, but Azarias soon realized nothing in this world came without a cost. After the meal, Tanya brought him to the control room. She introduced him to VIDA, the bunker's artificial intelligence system. Azarias was amazed to see such advanced technology still functioning. But before he could fully process it, Tanya made a request. VIDA, originally designed to operate a subway system, had limited memory capacity. Despite Tanya lifting its restrictions, the system was overwhelmed from years of analyzing samples and managing the bunker. The only way to ensure the bunker's continued operation was to expand VIDA's storage capacity. Tanya asked Azarias to retrieve a hard drive from a lab 40 kilometers away. However, the outside world was fraught with danger, and without proper equipment, it was a near suicidal mission. Azarias was about to refuse when a sudden jolt of pain shot through his ankle. VIDA had detected a suspicious look in his eyes and activated the shackle. Understanding he had no choice, Azarias reluctantly agreed. Tanya retrieved a protective suit from storage and gave Azarias an extra oxygen tank. The tank would last a maximum of 6 hours, just enough time for Azarias to make a round trip if he moved quickly. Before his departure, Tanya reminded him that the hard drive was extremely fragile. It couldn't withstand impacts or come into contact with water. Though he was clearly unhappy about the mission, Azarias said nothing and set off once everything was ready. However, the journey proved to be far more challenging than Azarias had imagined. Not long after he started, dark clouds began gathering in the sky, signaling an impending, violent storm in the area. Luckily, Azarias managed to reach the lab just as the storm was about to hit. Inside the equipment room, he found the hard drive without much trouble. But as he prepared to leave, the storm arrived in full force. The wind howled outside, and Azarias considered hiding in the lab until it passed. However, his oxygen would only last 2 hours, barely enough to make it back to the bunker. Faced with the threat of suffocation, Azarias had no choice but to take the risk. He fashioned a makeshift raincoat out of plastic sheets he found among the ruins. But the storm's ferocity far exceeded his expectations. As soon as he stepped outside, the raging winds pinned him against a corner. Left with no other choice, Azarias continued searching for a temporary shelter, but the storm showed no sign of letting up, and his oxygen supply dwindled rapidly. Desperately, he looked for an abandoned oxygen station to refill his tank, but all the city's stations had long since stopped working. His efforts were in vain. In despair, Azarias made a life-or-death decision. He removed his mask, prepared to breathe the toxic air directly. At that moment, he noticed a corpse not far away. Meanwhile, back at the bunker, Tanya monitored his oxygen levels and saw them drop to 0. Believing the mission had failed and that Azarias was dead, she sank into disappointment. But just as she was about to give up hope, the bunker door opened. Tanya rushed out to see Azarias standing there, hard drive in hand. Overcome with relief, she took the drive and immediately connected it to the central system. To her surprise, the hard drive not only expanded VIDA's capacity, but also contained valuable data from the lab. These records would significantly improve her experimental methods. In gratitude, Tanya brought out a canned meal she had been saving for years and shared it with Azarias. As they enjoyed the meal, they exchanged stories of their pasts in the post-apocalyptic world. Tanya asked Azarias to stay and help with her experiments. But when Azarias learned that she intended to nurture embryos, he adamantly opposed the idea. He argued that bringing new life into such a toxic and dangerous world was deeply irresponsible. Despite his protests, Tanya insisted on proceeding. She believed in VIDA's calculations. The Earth's environment would gradually recover in the coming decades. As long as humanity could produce offspring, there was hope for civilization's survival. The disagreement escalated into a heated argument, and Azarias ultimately chose to leave. Not long after his departure, Tanya successfully nurtured a new embryo. She prepared to implant it into her body for artificial gestation, but just as she was filled with hope, she discovered with horror that the embryo had once again perished. It was her last viable sample. Without it, her experiments were doomed to fail. Devastated, Tanya sat alone in the corner of the bunker, overcome with the realization that humanity might truly be at its end. Just as she was losing all hope, Azarias unexpectedly returned. He revealed that he had found signs of life near the coast, evidence that Earth's ecosystem was not entirely dead. Tanya followed Azarias to the shore, where they discovered animals on the beach and an abundance of plant life in the ocean. Azarias dove into the water and collected some seaweed, which they brought back to the bunker. Tanya prepared a simple but hearty meal from the seaweed, and for the first time in years, the two ate until they were full. During the meal, Tanya apologized to Azarias for their earlier conflict. After some reflection, she admitted that he might be right. In a world like this, choosing not to have children might be an act of mercy. Azarias forgave her, and the two lonely survivors began to grow closer, kindling a spark of affection in the midst of the apocalypse. However, just as their relationship deepened, Azarias suddenly collapsed in pain. Tanya realized with horror that she had forgotten to remove his electronic shackle. She frantically called on VIDA to release it, but the AI refused. As it turned out, this had been VIDA's plan all along. After analyzing the bunker's resources, VIDA concluded that they were insufficient to sustain two people. To ensure Tanya's survival, it had activated its life preservation protocol, marking Azarias as the first expendable target. Furious, Tanya grabbed a machete and threatened to kill herself unless VIDA released Azarias. Unbeknownst to VIDA, Tanya had programmed a first law into its system during an earlier reset. VIDA was required to prioritize Tanya's survival above all else. If Tanya died, VIDA would permanently shut down. Faced with this dilemma, VIDA's logic faltered, and it ultimately chose to comply. It released the shackle and then initiated a system reset, wiping all safety logs to prevent further errors. This reset, however, erased all of VIDA's memories of Tanya. Though heartbroken, VIDA honored its core directive to protect her life. After VIDA's reboot, Tanya and Azarias settled into a life together in the bunker. Azarias began broadcasting their location in hopes of finding other survivors. Perhaps the signal would reach someone out there, or perhaps humanity was truly extinct. Either way, it no longer mattered. This concludes the story of the 2024 disaster movie, AI. That's it for today's review. See you next time.